All right, here is our next trip. We go down to Ushuaia. We get on our boat. Oh,
No.
wrong boat. This boat. And we go south. Further south than Ushuaia. That would mean Antarctica. Down through the Drake Passage, which was kind of rough. And make land. Well, mostly islands, but...
Icebergs.
And icebergs, yeah. Big icebergs, small icebergs, glaciers, lots of snow. And this is during their summertime, and well, of course we get penguins.
Gen 2.
And that does not mean Generation 2, that's Gen 2.
Gentoo.
And which one are these?
They're not crab eaters. They're the other ones. The big big leopard seals. Leopard seals.
Leopard seals?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course they wanted to get to the ocean when we were walking by. So here they come, there they go. And that is actually our ship's doctor down there, making sure that none of the crew or none of the passengers get trampled over by these guys.
They had the right of way. They stopped us from going through.
But they made it down to the ocean. And there they go. And there's penguins watching.
I think those are Gen 2s also. That's a chin strap. Yeah, you can see the little... Looks like he's got a cap.
He's got a little strap underneath his chin. Yes, and penguins have the right of way also. And then we have the rookery, which most of these are the babes or they're molting. So they're just waiting to go in after the molt is done. But it's amazing, these things, you know, they're not right out of the water, they go up the mountain. Here's some of the views.
And we're headed further south, down various passageways through the islands. This is Edinburgh Rock, and it's lava and hexagonal crystals. Very similar to the Ireland's Dance of Giants, or Giants Causeway.
And then we have more penguins. Or we kind of like to say that they were baby orcas.
See him, Mom? Yes. Jesus. Lord. Wow. Oh, nice. Thank you.
Out further.
Huh? Further?
Out further. Blow, pump, down. Blow, pump.
I can't see it.
It's out by that iceberg with the point.
The black part of the iceberg? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, we have a couple of humpbacks that we're turning towards, and one of them has breached, come out of the water, and we'll see if it does it again, but we are turning towards a couple of the humpbacks, and one of them at least has been a bit active.
Yes, we have whales sitting there or going out, but watch that iceberg on the right as we keep going here. Yeah, same iceberg.
Right in front of it. Oh my God, it doesn't take it out my foot.
Just a note, we have some whales sitting here. But icebergs, 80% of the iceberg is underwater. And they tend to flip over once in a while. And you don't know when it's going to flip. So stay away from them. These two are kind of sitting still, probably digesting all the krill they just scooped up. And then we have this guy, which was way out in the distance, just flapping his tail. And you can see that iceberg back there. It is probably stuck on the ground because there's 80% below that's still going down. Bang. And more baby orca.
No, those are penguins.
Miniature orca?
No, pengers. Those are pengers.
They're black and white.
They're pengers.
They eat fish.
They're penguins.
We are cruising along on basically an electric boat. It has electric motors. There is a generator creating electricity. And that's why we get a lot more wildlife around us. And look at those icebergs. And the whale tails.
And you're close.
Going every which direction they are.
Wow, sounds great. Look at that.
Oh my word.
That's a whale. That was nice. It's still there. Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. Big pond. That's a poor little penguin on a big iceberg. And you can kind of see how much is underneath that, what's on the surface.
More interesting bergs.
Yeah. And then glaciers coming off. And then this is a narrow passage, which I have a short on, which I'll try to link up above.
I think that's the Lanier Channel.
But that's a glacier coming down. Very interesting icebergs. Some of them definitely have flipped, as you see that one. They melt at different rates. And then they have research centers. Some, most not being used actually, I think, but there's some that are used. We did not stop at anything that was being used.
Right.
Everywhere we stopped and we could get on shore, there was always penguins.
Lots of penguins.
Lots of pingers.
And that's the Dell penguin. And then, of course, to get to shore, we use Zodiacs.
This fun just kind of cruising around.
Now you can see that the iceberg right there next to him has melted a bit and come up a little bit. There are some massive icebergs out there that have been stuck on the continental shelf and don't move once they get stuck until they really melt down, which can take, oh, they said something like 10 to 30 years to melt. So something like that would take a long time to melt. And then, of course, you find wildlife on the actual icebergs.
I think that's a crab-eater seal. They don't eat crabs. It was a mistranslation of the German word that for the guy used when he found the seals, called them something German, and then they translated it wrong.
Okay, pay attention, guys. One, two, three, four.
Oh my god. Oh, I got it right now.
And then we have a spy-hopping orca. Now on the trip they said, that's humpback, that they usually see 1 or 2 pods of orcas. We saw a lot more of them. We also went a lot further south than they normally go. And I think we've seen a lot more wildlife on this trip than they normally see.
Because we had really good weather.
Yeah. We had really good weather.
Oh!
We had some nice weather. We had a little bit of rain, and then there was snow. Was that overnight?
Yeah, it was early in the morning.
We had some snow, which actually covered the deck. They were actually out there shoveling the snow off the deck, and a couple of kids actually made some snowmen on the front of the deck. Now, they weren't very big, but there was some snowmen.
There was definitely snow.
And we actually got out on kayaks. So there's our ship way over there. There was not a lot of large icebergs, and then they told us to stay away from them anyhow, because you don't know when they're going to roll over, and you don't want to be rolled over on a kayak.
Gotta make sure my paddle doesn't strike a bird.
Lots of penguins. Okay, here's a sample of what's going to happen. Yes, we had people jump into that water. Polar plunge. This is how they did it. And that's how we did it. That is not warm water, people.
28 degrees.
She got out as quick as possible. I'm more like a white whale. I went down a lot further. It didn't come out as quick. There was a few people that actually swam around a little bit before they came out.
And there were some idiots that did it twice.
Oh God.
Sunsets were beautiful. It's about as far south as we got is 67 degrees. So we're well past the Antarctic Circle.
Yeah. And then coming back up. Oh, not coming back up yet. Shit, I gotta cut that. Off to another research station.
Is that it, Kevin? Yeah, okay. Right, hello folks, and welcome to Station Y. Now this is one of the British Antarctic Survey, it wasn't quite that, I'll come to that in a minute, one of their base stations on the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula in the post-war era. The British presence in Antarctica as a permanent presence rather than just the expeditions of Scott and Shackleton or the British Graham Land expedition starts in the Second World War in 1943. Now, during the war, for political and military reasons, the British decided it was necessary to have a permanent presence on Antarctica. Now, partially this is military, as a sort of observation post in case enemy vessels are doing anything in these waters, but it's also a political purpose to stake a claim or reinforce the British claim to the Antarctic Peninsula. So Operation Tabarin in 1943 is a military operation that establishes two bases in Antarctica, one at Deception Island in the South Shetland Islands and one at Port Lockroy, which is where we were a couple of days ago, further up the coast of the peninsula. This then sets up the first permanent presence in Antarctica, which has been maintained almost continually since then. In the mid-1940s, 1945, at the end of the war, that military operation then closes and hands over to a civilian operation. The governance of Antarctica is going to be administered through the Falkland Islands, and so this becomes a dependency of the Falkland Islands. And so they carry out the Falkland Island Dependency Survey, or FIDS. So bases are opened by FIDS all along the peninsula at various different times. This one was opened in 1955 as Base Y, and at the time it was in operation there were another three bases, A, E and F. One was Port Lockroy, one was Wordie House at the Winter Islands, which is just south of Peterman Island where we were a few days ago, and then there were two down here in Marguerite Bay, including this one. During the time it was in operation, anywhere between 4 and 10 men would have been based down here, quite often working on 2-year rotations in Antarctica, but they might move around the different stations. However, this hut was not in use for long. It closed after only 5 years, but was maintained as a hut. It was reused again in the late 1960s during a brief survey of this island, but then it was relegated to being a refuge hut for the new British base, which is still in operation to the, I think that's west, called Rovera Station, and that is still in operation today. But back in the 60s and 70s, when you had sledding parties coming from there, this was an ideal refuge hut for them if they couldn't make it all the way back to the base. It's now, in the 1960s, the Falkland Island Dependency Survey morphs into the British Antarctic Survey, which is still our survey organisation today. Their charitable arm is the United Kingdom Antarctic Heritage Trust, and they exist to maintain historic sites like this. And so in the 1990s, they renovated it and returned it to its 1950s appearance. So what you get is a good idea of the life of the men who were working down here. And these men were mainly carrying out meteorological or geological surveys and mapping the areas of the Antarctic Peninsula local to this area. But here you get a chance to see what their life was like in the place that they lived in. So you get to see their diet and the delicious food that they have available to them. You get to see their recreational facilities. no internet, so collections of magazines and board games, and their somewhat rather primitive living conditions and sleeping arrangements and toilet facilities down the end of the hut.
So they have a generator somewhere in here?
There's a generator room just around there as well, which is powered by fuel oil, and then they also had coal-burning stoves and ovens to keep warm.
Excuse me, Stephen, we have one guest coming back this way because the steps are too steep for Nancy. So just
Okay,
FYI.
thank you. So, take the chance to have a wander around. If you give yourself 10 minutes and then exit through the door at the back of the hut.
My sister.
And Adele penguins.
Hello everyone. Hello. And welcome to Mother is at the end of the beach there. You can enjoy.
And that was actually landfall of the continent versus an island, which is still considered the continent, and that's still an Adele penguin. That is a poor little molting penguin. And we have orcas.
That like to eat penguins.
Or fish, or krill. Yep, a lot of orca. And another ship out there. And more orca. So about our ship, that was the Lindblad
NatGeo. It was the National Geographic Resolution.
Resolution. So there's two of these ships in the world, I guess. They are built for ice. They are not icebreakers per se, but they can go through some ice.
Yeah, they're purpose-built for that, exploring that region, both the Arctic
North
and Antarctic.
or south.
Yeah, it was really comfy, really safe. I felt very comfortable being on that ship.
Can I say lots of orcas?
Just lots of whales in general.
But the backdrop is pretty nice.
Size of these icebergs.
And yeah,
That's an iceberg. That's not an island, it's an iceberg.
that is probably stuck on the shelf. And nice sunsets.
Yeah, we were watching the sunset and there was the orcas. This is all about the same time frame.
You can see some of the sun coming off, glinting off their dorsals.
There it is.
And more icebergs.
This is when we started heading back north. cruising through the sea ice and breaking some of it up.
Yeah, lots of icebergs. It wasn't as cold as I thought it would be. It was still freezing.
Oh yeah, but it was.
But I thought it would be colder. This is their summer. A lot of ice for summer, isn't it? But they have ice year round. And here we go, breaking. Here comes a bang. A lot of this would be considered sea ice because it forms on the sea versus calving off a glacier. And another research base. So most of these were left just for visitors to come through and tour.
Yeah, this one I think was used in the 1950s for about three or 4 years, maybe 5 years.
Now all the supplies that you saw on the shelves in the previous ones and here was what was left. They didn't bring this in to just show on the shelves. They left everything.
For a long time before they go in. All these guys here on the side, closest to the water, have been there for at least an hour. And sometimes it's almost like they just need one animal to go in first.
And then they run in.
Crab eaters. 2 of them. Same guy. It's just my picture.
Has someone ordered them to stand here? Or?
Yeah. That one on the right is just a perfect spot. I'll go a little closer. Wow.
This guy was just taking a nap in the ocean. Just closed eyes, nose up so he could breathe, and just snoozing up and down with the ocean.
Wow, that's
Not getting banged with the iceberg though, I'm surprised. I'm not sure how they can snooze in that cold water.
They get a lot more blubber.
They're looking at us.
Is that blue?
Yeah.
I mean, that, you can't.
around again. This is not normal.
It's good to hear. Wow, look at that.
And
Going under.
Down.
Going under the boat.
and humongous icebergs. I think that was bigger than an apartment complex. Okay, then we go back across the Drake Passage, which was much better than coming down.
Yep.
So, we are going back to Ushuaia.
Via Cape Horn. We got to see Cape Horn. Southernmost tip of South America.
Which is not really much to look at, really.
No, there's a memorial, and that's about it. But it's,
so we were
it's
at
an island.
ocean, miles away, so it's not really...
Yeah, we didn't get to go very near. We were 3 miles or so from it.
Yeah. Yeah, as the bird flies.
Mm-hmm.
And back to Ushuaia we go, and getting ready for the next trip. Should we go to a little island in the middle of nowhere?